Again, Kim, thanks so much for taking the time to chat. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Kim Paris, and I am the Emerging Talent Manager at Industrial Light and Magic in the San Francisco and Vancouver studio.
I love that. That's really cool. And I'd love to talk a little bit about your background. You've worked both in academia as well as visual effects. What inspired you to switch fields? And I'm also curious, like, what skills helped you with that whole transition?
Yeah, so I spent about 7 years in higher education. Worked in recruitment, international education, orientation. So really worked with students all the way from the beginning of their transition into post-secondary, all the way to graduation and kind of out the door into their careers. And it was a very rewarding role that I had, and I really enjoyed it. But this role was really something that married a lot of what I have passion for and some of the skills that I have for. So I'm still getting to work with students. I'm still getting to see them, kind of come into the industry and start their first jobs. But I also have always had an interest in film. So when I actually started my university journey, I was headed into film studies and into looking at the production side of things. And then I kind of fell into the trap of having people say, the film industry is not a stable career, that's not where you want to go, you need to get something that's going to be a stable foundation. And that's kind of how my path went. And so this job was a really cool opportunity to be able to kind of go back into that passion I had for film and also use, my education and where my career had taken me. Yeah, I would say that the skills that transferred was, some of those common soft skills, teamwork, collaboration, communication. I think those have all been helpful. But I think also coming from an environment in higher ed where there's a lot of research and learning, that translates. Somewhere like ILM, it's just called something different. It's innovation and advancement, right? So there's always new things happening, and I think being able to kind of be adaptable to change and those things happening within the studio, I think that's been really key to being able to come into this role. Yeah,
Cool.
It's been a great transition.
I love that. That's really awesome. And I'm curious too, like, what do you say to people who say that art's not a real career or it's film's unstable, things like that?
Yeah.
Like my wife, she's an artist, but for up until she was about 24, until basically when I first met her, her parents were mostly, her father was always kind of like, that's not a real career. So she did psychology, she did like everything but the thing that was really her true passion. So I'm curious, like, what do you usually say to people when they hear that?
Yeah, that sounds very familiar. I ended up in psychology as well.
I noticed, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Nowadays, I talk with a lot of students in the classroom, and they're usually very aware that it's not a stable career, or they think that, or they've been told that. And I always say, like, you get one shot at this. You get one shot at doing a career. I mean, you can change later on, but when you're that age, like, you've got the energy and you've got the passion, and I say, just go for it. You can always change later on, but you got to give it that real try to see if it's going to happen for you. And I think it's a growing industry. Like nowadays, you might not end up at your dream studio first off, but you're going to end up somewhere, and you can build upon that. And so I think challenge the narrative a bit that it's not stable. Give it a try. What you put into it is what you're going to get out.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And I think the kind of correlation with art being the thing that people associate as being unstable, but like, as you said, it's an industry, it's a commercial industry. So there's money involved. There's, however we work, it is, finance involved. If there's an actual industry around it, then obviously, there's the ability to make that a career. So
I think it's tough because sometimes you have an image of, okay, I'm going to school for this, and this is what I want to do. But it might not look like that, especially in your first few years. So, examples is we might have people come in, or folks come in, and they're production assistants, or they work at our front desk, and maybe they really want to be, in lighting. But that might not be where you start out, but you can get there. And so I think it's about just getting your foot in the door and trying different things and not leaving it all together.
Yeah. And also too, like your career and focus shifts over time. I wanted to be a ninja at one point in my
Yeah.
life. I was maybe 4 at the time, but
Yeah. Yeah. Things
we
change.
pivot. I'm curious too, like how did you first get involved with ILM? Like in terms of, was it more the passion first and then kind of looking at, well, how do I make that into opportunity, or how did it
Yeah.
first come about?
I think for me, I always kind of had my eye on what was happening, not just for myself, but because I was working with students who were interested in all these different, industries and fields. And so it's kind of part of my job is to know what was happening out there. So, I'm active on LinkedIn, and I remember seeing this role, and then I actually ended up talking to a recruiter on LinkedIn. So just like, I talk to to students out there all the time is, have conversations on LinkedIn is that's what's happened for me. And that kind of led to some conversation with a few folks at ILM, and then ended up, interviewing. And I really had no expectation, because I kind of thought this is an industry that I really have no background in. I'm not a huge visual effects person. I haven't gone to school for it. So I was really, no expectations. But I think, they were looking for somebody that had experience with higher education and the post-secondary world. And so it really was a good fit. And I, on many a day, think, I don't know how this role came to be, because it's just like the most perfect role for everything that I'm interested in and all of my experience. It was kind of luck at the right place at the right time. And it just kind of happened.
So cool. In terms of advice for people on LinkedIn, like, do you have any advice around cold outreach? Like, what do you say? Because I collect so many good and also bad emails and messages, just because I think they're great examples. Because I will say just quickly that, like, I think most people assume that everyone else is doing the right job, and I think when people actually see how little effort, and I think that's kind of the reoccurring theme already here, is putting effort in, but I think there are a lot of people who tend to just expect like everyone else is normal, but like when they see the bar is so low, it's like you literally just putting in effort, like, hello, let me introduce myself, and front load some of the information that you need, and also try to keep it short enough that I'm not wasting your time. These are the simple things that people overlook. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays I get quite a few LinkedIn messages. So it's something that I am starting to see, like, okay, this is a good outreach. This one maybe needs some work, but I would say, it's totally what you're saying about, the effort is, if I get a message and all it says is, I think ILM is a great studio and I'd love to work there one day. It's really hard to reply to that, because
you send a thumbs up.
Yeah, it's like, that's great. Best of luck with your journey. But if somebody reaches out and says, I'm in school, this is what I'm studying, I'm really interested in going into this discipline. It would be great to be able to get, 15 minutes of your time, or if you could just reply back, I have a couple questions. Mm-hmm. And then you put the questions in there. That's meaning that there's no work on my end. I literally just have to reply. But I think when it's vague or there's not enough information in there, it's really hard to put in the effort to reply to that. I think it's also be purposeful with what you're saying. So make sure you spell industrial light and magic correctly, or, make sure that if you're addressing somebody, if they're a Mrs. or a Miss or not a Mr. We get that a lot. And, spelling and grammar, it does, we do notice that. So I would say, take some time and actually look at what you're saying, make sure it makes sense, and make sure you're reaching out to the right person. That's another huge thing, is if you're interested in saying, going into animation, reaching out to the person that does, facilities coordination, it's probably not your right audience. So make sure you do a little research and look at, like, who's the person that I might want to contact. And you might not hear back. You might not hear back from the person that you were ideally wanting to talk to, but maybe it'll be somebody else. So keep trying, and also be genuinely interested in what they have to say. So don't think that you already know the answers or have expectations of what they're going to say. Is genuinely be interested in learning from them.
Yeah, that's great. And do you encourage follow-up occasionally? Let's say if you don't hear from someone a couple of months from now, maybe send a friend a follow-up, not 20 more times the next
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, I've done that is I'll have, 3 students reach out to me from the same school and they've kind of got the same profile and I'll respond and then I'll get a follow-up a month later and be like, oh, right, there was 2 other students from that same school with the same kind of profile, but you kind of forget, who you've responded to. And so, yeah, a friendly reminder, just checking in. And I think that's totally fine.
Cool. And that's really awesome. And I'm curious, and this is more of a broad thing, obviously beyond hard skills, and we can kind of lean into that a little bit, but obviously that's where it gets more specific. But in terms of soft skills and more in general, like what are some of the things that typically you do look for, both in senior people, but also juniors across the board when they're applying?
Yeah. And I mean, I can definitely talk a little bit more to the junior side of things, but it's probably relevant at any level. But we definitely look for soft skills. I think sometimes everyone's so focused on, what does my reel look like, or, what are my tech skills? But soft skills go a long way. Being able to know that you can communicate is key. Being able to know that you can collaborate and work in a team environment is very important. I mean, working in visual effects, you're working in one group project for a long time. So we need to make sure that you have those skills of communication, working with others, time management. So making sure that you're going to be able to get, that shot in for dailies, or make sure that even though you're working independently, you can get what you need done in a timely manner and when you're supposed to. Because we're not able to always be, on somebody to say, hey, you need this in by a certain time, or this needs to be done so somebody else can take a look at it. You really have to be able to demonstrate that you have those skills as well. And that comes out from, the very beginning of us interacting with a candidate, showing up for interviews on time, communicating back in a timely manner with a recruiter that's, trying to get, more information from you. It shows up in cover letters. It shows up in, all of it. And so I think that is definitely something, the soft skills are just as important sometimes as the hard skills, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm trying to hire several people right now, and that's like the one recurring thing is must be able to communicate well. It's such a vital thing that seems to kind of get missed a lot. But yeah, that's great. In terms of conveying certain things like that, because it's easy to say, I'm a great communicator. And some of these things obviously become more apparent as you talk to those people. But whether it is during the interview or ways that they can kind of help indicate or prove or show that they have certain soft skills, like, is there any recommendations you have for how to kind of get that across?
Yeah, cover letters.
I'm so glad you said that. Nobody ever talks about cover letters. And it's like, to me, the most important thing. No one's going to look at your reel if you don't have a good letter.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think this is the thing. There's one of the recruiters I work with, and she's always saying cover letters, because it is so important. I mean, a reel shows the work that you can do. A resume shows what you have done, but a cover letter shows, who you are and what you're going to offer. It is a way for you to showcase, why do you want to work from us? How do you communicate? It's really an opportunity for you to take a moment and tell us more about yourself. And I think that that's something that a lot of applicants forget, is that this is, that's your chance to shine, is through a cover letter, and make sure to include that with everything else. And that's also what's going to make you stand out, is being able to kind of demonstrate and show to us who you are and why you want to come to ILM. I think that's really important.
I think it's also incentive too, because again, you've got to consider how many applicants you're typically talking to on a daily basis. And the thing is that if someone is literally saying, hey, here's my stuff, which is something I've seen, like some really talented senior people who are like, no one seems to call me back. And I'm like, I bet it's your cover letter. And it is, as soon as they actually put in the effort there to convey their skill set and incentivize them to actually click the link and look at their stuff.
It makes you stand out. And I think we read them. The recruiters are reading the cover letters. And so, being able to talk a bit more about yourself, especially too, if you're transitioning from something, a little bit different, is being able to indicate to us, hey, this is my experience. And this is why I think my experience is going to fit with what I'm looking at doing now. And I think that's something that yeah, it just really helps. It goes a long way. A good cover letter goes a long way.
Just to dive a little bit into it, are there certain things that you would recommend talking about? Like one thing which is not to talk about is like there. I think like story, a little bit of backstory is good in 1 or 2 lines. Their life story, picture of their dog, and everything else is a
Yeah.
little bit too much. Like one thing I would always recommend is like first paragraph's more of a summary, just as a chance to kind of give context. But for you, like are there certain things that you always encourage people to convey in that letter?
Yeah, conveying passion. That is one thing at ILM is everyone here is just so passionate about the work that we do, about the jobs that they have. Like everybody is just so excited and passionate every day about what we do. And so I think seeing that in a candidate makes us excited. It's like, yeah, this is somebody who's just as excited as we are, and they want to be here. And so that's something, as I would say, include it is talk about the passion around visual effects and the work that you've done and the work, that you've done in your past. I think that is great. Explaining a bit more about your journey. So talking a bit about like, this is what I've done in the past. This is how I think it's relevant to where I'm going. These are the skills that I have, and this is why they're relevant. It's your personal selling card. It's really talking yourself up. And that's something I see a lot in juniors is they're almost too humble and kind of nervous to talk themselves up. And it's like, no, this is your chance. This is what's going to get you into that interview, is to be able to say like, hey, I'm great, and this is why. And at the same time, I mean, it's a confidence, not an overconfidence. There's a balance there. But yeah, it's being able to kind of talk yourself up and being able for us to see that you're passionate and you're skilled. And yeah, and definitely don't go too far into the personal life. I think, there's definitely a limit of what we need to know.
Yep. Yeah, agreed there. That's usually the ones that get shared. So,
yes.
I definitely think that, it's either people are going to be too shy or too overconfident in the beginning of their career, which I find always kind of funny. It's usually around like mid to senior that you start to kind of get a bit more like, okay, yeah, this is a job and I'm here to contribute versus I've arrived, everyone get out of my way, here I am.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, it's something that I talk about sometimes with some of our juniors when they come in is, you might be sitting next to somebody who's worked at ILM for 20 plus years and they've worked on some of the coolest stuff, but they're going to be so humble and they're going to be willing to teach you. And if they're being humble, that means that you are definitely humble. And be confident, but also just be aware that, everyone around here is really humble for what they've done. And that's just really important to keep in mind is don't come in kind of, thinking that you know everything. Yeah.
Show ILM how it's done.
Yeah. Be open to learning. That's a huge thing for juniors is just being able to say like, yeah, I'm open to learning.
I had lunch with a few ILM supervisors one time in SF, just on Chestnut at one of the bar restaurants there. And I invited someone from DreamWorks who was a junior along, and I thought this would be a really great connection for him, but he did all the talking the whole time. And it's one of those things that the more you talk, the less you listen. So I think it's actually a great opportunity to absorb knowledge and ask questions rather than, again, trying to convey how great you are.
And that's I mean, going back to cover letter and even interview is, I think we will more often hire for potential than we will of like, what are you bringing is if we see a junior and we're like, they're open to learning. Mm-hmm. They might not have used this software, they might not have used this tool before, but they're so passionate and open to learning, that's what's really going to land with us. And that's what we'll hire for, rather than somebody who's coming in overconfident and, telling us that they know how to do all those things, right?
I guess like one question just around that I was going to ask later on, but is software a really specific requirement in a lot of ways? Like, let's say that they come in, they've got Blender experience, but you guys are using Maya. Something that's similar but not the same. Yeah,
I think we just ran some Jedi Academies in the generalist and virtual art departments. And I think there was a lot of nerves from some of our juniors who were thinking like, oh, I don't know this software or I don't know how to use this tool, but we'll teach you. That's kind of, again, with the openness to learning, is, if you've used Blender, then, you're going to be able to use what we're using. It's different, but at least you have the base concept and understanding. And that's kind of the tech skills, is like, if you've got some of them, then we know that we can teach you. And if you've gone to school, gone to post-secondary and done some of the programs, is we know you've got an understanding. That's the main thing.
Willingness to learn new software, new technology. Again, it's something that I see a lot, is people who are kind of married to the thing that they started on versus realizing like we are in an innovative industry.
Yeah, that's very true. I think, again, with some of the juniors we just had in, is I think they were really nervous to start with some of the new tools that we use. And they're like, I've used this before and this is what I'm, really comfortable with. But being comfortable is not something that's going to last long when you work in visual effects, or especially in our studio. Is, I think if you're comfortable, it means that you're not learning. And like I was saying with ILM, is innovation and advancement in what we're using is constant. There's usually, when I go out to schools and I bring like a guest speaker, or I bring somebody from training with me, they'll say, "What's the hardest project you've ever worked on?" And they'll almost always say, "The project that we're working on now is always the hardest because it's the newest technology. We're working on new innovative things, and so we're learning. It's like learning all of this new stuff." And so I think that's it's you're going to have to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to learn these new things. You're going to have to learn to work with new software. And that's just kind of how it is.
Absolutely. I think in general, the more you stay out of your comfort zone, the better. I guess one more question around this subject, but is hiring juniors more of like a more recent thing for ILM in terms of, at least like the way I look at certain tiers of companies, whether ILM, other like DD, ones that have been around for quite a while that have a lot of prestige. You got pick of the litter. Like everyone, their dream job is always, I want to work for Industrial Light and Magic. And knowing that with TV and a lot of other areas blowing up very, very quickly into massive industries across like more global now, opposed to just SF and Singapore before, is that something that more recently you guys have started to like look for nurturing talent from a younger age versus bringing in more senior staff?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think in some ways it's maybe a bit of a myth that we don't hire juniors. Like I hear that quite a bit. And I think that there have always been, some junior talent, maybe not as much, and maybe in some different areas, rather than, now I think it is growing throughout. But even my role, this is a newer role, as emerging talent manager. So I'm just working with emerging talent. And so I would say that it's growing. Definitely, I think more recently is we're running programming, training programming. We have internships. We have, all of that under the Jedi Academy. ILM is growing. We're growing more and more and more. And so it means that there's more opportunity for bringing in juniors and being able to kind of grow talent and have them, pipelined in to be able to grow them.
That's cool. I had Rob Burdell on a while back when they were just opening up the Sydney office, and I was excited for that because, again, I feel like Australia's got a lot of untapped talent that, it's exciting to see there being so much growth over there as well. Yeah,
I think that it's exciting to have juniors in the studio. They bring a type of excitement and energy.
It's true. Everyone else has been there, done that. So
yeah, I think it's funny. Some of the supervisors will have them work with some juniors or mentor them. It's funny. I think that the supervisors get more out of it sometimes because it's just that re-energizing of hey, this is exciting to be here, and what I'm doing is so cool. And sometimes you can kind of forget until you have that, junior talent sitting in front of you being like, "You worked on what? That's the coolest thing I've ever heard about." And
my granddad loved that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's definitely something that's growing within ILM and will, I think, continue to grow.
That's cool. And I guess what's your opinion of the state of the industry in terms of visual effects? Because I look back 2012 to me, it was kind of specifically for LA was definitely kind of a a huge shift where globalization started happening. Vancouver and a lot of other countries Vancouver's not a country, obviously.
Yeah.
I used to live in the middle of Yaletown, but yeah, it's something that obviously VFX became globalized, and I was very excited about that, just to see everyone else get a chance of this. And since then, again, like I bring up TV, even with video games, VR, like so many new industries kind of really expanding, TV being one that getting real budgets for once versus it being more of a cheaper industry. Do you feel like now, like it's a thriving industry right now, it's the time to be in VFX compared to 10 years ago where it's still, you know, a hustle kind of industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still newish to this industry, but from everything that I'm seeing is, yeah, it's growing, it's expanding, and it's a great opportunity and time to be within visual effects. Our Vancouver studio, like we're expanding so much as far as talent and hiring, and that's the same for all the studios. And so I think it's definitely growing. Like you said, globally, we have studios, like you said, Vancouver, San Francisco, Sydney, Singapore, and London. So we have the 5 studios, and all of them are working and have lots of work.
That's cool.
Definitely busy.
Are there any key disciplines that you find like there's just a massive need for? I would say probably effects, because you can't have enough explosions. But you know, what would be some key disciplines that you feel are good, bankable ones? Like I'll just give some context around, like, let's say a character TD, there's going to be work for that type of discipline, but there's not going to be a massive amount versus lighting and comp. That's part one. But then part two would be in terms of also what ones would you recommend for more introductory, like junior positions to kind of get in the door and venture out from?
So the big one right now is generalists. I mean, for other studios, that's kind of known as environments. So ILM calls them generalists. But that is something that we are always hiring for and always in need for. We've run a Jedi Academy last year and just finished a Jedi Academy for generalists. So that's something I would say for juniors is a good place to start, is, you know, environments. And that's like 3D environments. That's going to be something that I think we're looking for a lot. The virtual art department is growing with the growth of stagecraft. It's something that we're expanding, and it's similar to Gen, except that it's like working in real time in collaboration with the stage environment. And so as we keep expanding stagecraft, that's going to be a role that we're looking for. And we also did a Jedi Academy in virtual art department. So also kind of a junior friendly area. And I'd also say groom. Groom is something that's kind of a niche, like specific role. And so we're always kind of looking for folks in that area. And as there's, you know, more, you know, heroes at the forefront of the screen, is that something that we need artists who can do that work as well. So I'd say those are kind of the 3 main ones that we're. And
just for the layman, stagecraft is just for more the general buzzwords, virtual production, and groom being more hair, things like that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Like it's good to know, because again, like there's obviously things like getting into comp, camera tracking, things like that are good kind of low barrier of entry. Well, no, not that either of those can be a master of its own, but is that also a very competitive one too, where there's a lot of people typically going for those. So I'm curious for you, like when people are sending in their reels, do you have any advice or common things that you get requested to kind of pass on to everyone in terms of things to keep in mind when cutting a reel and conveying their talents?
Yeah, the biggest thing is quality over quantity. Is make sure you're putting your best work in there. You might have just done, a school program where you've got, 2-3 years of work. It doesn't mean that we need to see all of it. Just put in your best work, put your best work first. So when you, when we first see a reel, is that first, few shots, first few pieces of work, that's really what's going to grab our attention. So make sure you put your best work first. Know what role that you're applying for. So, and what I mean by that is, if you're applying for a role, make sure what you're including in the reel is relevant to that. So, live action visual effects is, you might have done some great anime work, but that's probably what's not going to land with us at ILM. So make sure you're putting relevant work to what you're applying to. I always say it's, I think there's some folks out there that say don't include like project work or team project work. I always say, you can include that. We know that you've worked on team projects, but just make sure that you can talk to the work that you've done so that, if you do come in for an interview and you've got somebody saying, hey, break down to me what you've done within here, make sure you can speak to it. Also for fan art, that's something that we kind of get asked a lot. I would say, yes, you can include it, but make sure not to make it seem like you actually worked on that project. So kind of make it, knowing that it's, fan art and that, it's just you're passionate about that type of, shot or, yeah, that's some of the advice that usually I'll give about reels.
That's great. And I guess one thing that I'm curious about is red flags. I'm always curious because it's not a negative thing. It's more just self-awareness. Like people understand like, oh, wait, maybe I do that and I've never been aware of it, or you mean that's a thing I shouldn't do? So I'm just kind of curious, like what are some common things that typically come up that could be something that puts people off of that candidate?
Not being able to explain the work. So I think it's a huge red flag when in an interview, we'll start talking to a candidate and be like, explain, this breakdown or explain this to us. And the candidate can't, tell us what tools they used or what software they were working with, or, that's a huge red flag.
I didn't make it. I downloaded it off of YouTube.
Yeah.
Let's remove the name from the watermark.
Yeah, this is, I'm totally that person. And that's another thing is don't pretend work that isn't yours is yours.
It's a small industry.
It's totally a small industry. And that's something, is ILM folks know each other. And if they see a shot and they've got a candidate sitting there saying, yeah, I worked on this and did this. And they're like, I know the person that did this.
I've had my reel sent to me many times.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I'm shocked by it when that happens because it's pretty bold, but definitely something not to do. That's really the big things is just don't lie, don't make things up, be honest. Like we were talking about earlier, is being open to learning is key. And so if you're showing up and pretending to be something you're not, that's totally not conveying that you're open to learning.
I think it's great. I guess I got one last question, which would be just around people transitioning from other careers. What advice would you give? Because I think a lot of people, there might even be that self-talk about like, well, I'm in this industry, so I can't leverage these talents to move to another. Just in general, like what advice would you give for someone, let's say that they're in their 30s and they decided, hey, I've always wanted to do this thing and it's now or never.
Yeah, that's totally kind of what happened with me is it was kind of the now or never. And I'm uncomfortable a lot of days in this role is because I don't necessarily know all the answers, or maybe I don't have a background in some of the technology that they're talking about, in meetings. But it's a lot of, messaging people, messaging different folks and saying, hey, I'd love to sit down. Can we go for coffee? Can we chat about this? Can I'd love to learn more. And that's once you're in the role. I'd say when you're looking to make that transition, it's the same advice we give to juniors. Reach out to folks on, LinkedIn, try and, make connections with people in the industry. There's even lots of, different credentials or certificates you can do. YouTube, your website was something I had checked out before I started my role. So, there's lots of different resources out there that you can kind of check out and learn a little bit before you enter that new industry. But yeah, just stay curious. It's worth just giving it a shot and seeing how it goes.
I love that. Kim, this has been great. Thank you so much. Where can people go to find out more about ILM? That's the biggest softball question in the world, but also in terms of looking for careers at ILM.
Yeah, so our website is the best place to go. Mentioned a few times Jedi Academies. That's for juniors, definitely a great place to start, and that's on our website as well. So just like the ILM website, and also, like I said, reach out to people on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Cool. This is great. I'll make sure to link to everything in the show notes. But
Awesome.
again,
Thanks.
Kim, this has been so great. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.